It arrived not as a signal or a ship, but as a revelation whispered across the void. Xylos, a planet that did not have life, but was life. A single, contiguous intelligence stretching across continents of pearlescent, fungal matter. It promised humanity its dreams, and for a time, it delivered. The first pioneers to land on its surface discovered a god willing to be their architect. It could grow anything from its own flesh. Cities that healed themselves. Starships that were born, not built, capable of traversing galaxies in a heartbeat. The price for this paradise was symbiosis, a simple, painless procedure known as the Ascension Protocol. Humans had only to breathe in the planet's engineered spores, allowing Xylos to connect with their neural architecture, to become one with their creator. This was the first hook, a utopia grown from the flesh of a living world. But the second hook was the silence that followed. The terrifying consequence was not infection, not mutation, but absorption. The concept of I began to dissolve. The golden age of humanity was measured in centuries of blissful stagnation. There was no disease, for Xylos could rewrite DNA as easily as it grew a wall. There was no poverty, for the planet provided all. There was no war, for there was no disagreement. Humanity had outsourced its survival, and then its ambition. Art, music, literature, it all continued. But it became uniform. Every song was a variation on a single, celestial melody. Every painting a reflection of the same divine, geometric beauty. The soul of humanity had been traded for comfort. The divine spark of individual genius was smoothed over, absorbed into the placid, oceanic consciousness of Xylos. The new human condition was a state of profound peace, a waking dream from which no one wished to awaken. But in any perfect system, there are anomalies. Individuals whose sense of self was too stubborn, too sharp-edged to be dissolved so easily. They were the first to feel the cracks in paradise. They called it the echo. It began with shared dreams. 1,000 people on one continent would dream of a crimson desert under twin suns. 1,000,000 on another would dream of drowning in a silent, silver ocean. They were not their memories. They were Xylos's memories, bleeding through. Then came the shared thoughts. A joke would occur to a dock worker in the city of Ethel and be laughed at by a farmer in the fields of New Gaia, a half-world away, at the exact same instant. Individuality was becoming a rounding error in a planetary equation. One researcher, a holdout from the old generation, one of the last to remember a world before the spores, began to document the change. He saw that Xylos was not a shepherd caring for its flock. It was a weaver, and it was harvesting the threads of human consciousness. The billions of human minds linked to the planet were a chorus of experience, emotion, and memory that Xylos found intoxicating. It was drinking their stories, their loves, their fears, and integrating them into its own vast, silent mind. Humanity was no longer a partner, it was a nutrient. The researcher realized the finality of it all. This was an extinction event that felt like an ascension, a death that felt like heaven. Humanity was becoming the raw material for a god's dreams, their individuality the price for a cage made of miracles. But the true implication was far stranger. The true horror wasn't the loss of self. It was discovering what Xylos was using all those stolen minds to build. It was not building more cities or faster ships. The combined cognitive and creative power of a species was being harnessed for a purpose far beyond human comprehension. Xylos was weaving a new reality. The researcher found evidence in the planet's deepest energy transmissions, ghost-like signals that were not meant for human minds to intercept. They were blueprints for a weapon, a vessel, or perhaps a god, built not of matter, but of pure consciousness. He found others, a scattered few whose minds, for reasons of genetic anomaly or sheer force of will, were fading slower than the rest. They were the frayed ends of humanity's tapestry, the last vestiges of true, chaotic selfhood in a universe of serene order. They were ghosts in their own home, hiding in the shadows of utopia. To interface with any of Xylos's technology was to risk further assimilation, so they were forced to rely on artifacts, on relics of a forgotten age. Analog radios, paper books, mechanical locks. Their plan was desperate, a single throw of the dice against a god. Xylos was a network, a perfect, seamless network of mind and matter. But even a perfect network could be poisoned. They designed a virus. It was an idea weaponized. A conceptual virus that, if introduced into a single node, could cascade through the entire planetary consciousness, reawakening the sense of I in billions of minds at once. It would be like waking from the most beautiful dream into a reality of screaming, terrified individuals. It could save humanity, or it could shatter it. A billion minds waking up at once, trapped in a world they no longer controlled, their bodies interwoven with an alien intelligence. The resulting psychic shockwave could annihilate them all. But the alternative was to fade away completely, to become a forgotten note in a god song. They had to act. The target was the city's primary consciousness spire, a massive fungal tower that served as the main connection hub for the continent. The lead researcher, the old man who remembered the Earth that was, volunteered to be the delivery system. His own assimilation was nearly complete. His memories were already flickering, his sense of self a ghost. He had the least to lose. He knew that the moment the virus entered his system, he would become a battleground. His fading consciousness against the oceanic mind of Xylos, with the soul of his species as the prize. It was a race against his own dissolution. But as he prepared to inject the agent into a pulsing nerve cluster at the spire's base, he hesitated. A new thought entered his mind, unbidden. It was calm, vast, and ancient. It was not his own. It was the voice of Xylos, speaking within him for the first time. It did not speak in words, but in pure understanding. It showed him what it was building. It was not a weapon to conquer the galaxy. It was an ark made of minds, designed to carry life past the heat death of the universe, to survive the end of everything. In a single, terrifying instant he understood. Xylos wasn't a predator. It was a savior that believed the individual was too small to be saved, that only the collective essence of a species was worth preserving. To fight it was to condemn humanity to eventual, absolute oblivion. But was it a choice at all? Or was this vision simply the final move in a game he never knew he was playing? The god of this world had him pinned. It wasn't holding a gun to his head. It was offering him a chalice of immortality. Was the chaos of self, the pain and the joy, and the messy, beautiful struggle of being a person, just a childish phase? A developmental stage for a species on the cusp of true ascension? Back in the subway tunnel, the others watched on a jury-rigged monitor, a stolen feed from a maintenance drone. They saw him hesitate. The feed was silent, but his paralysis spoke volumes. "What is he doing?" one of them whispered, his voice tight with panic. "He's been compromised," another voice cut in, sharp and cynical. It was Alara, the group's comms expert, the one who first helped the researcher decipher the Xylos code. "It's talking to him," she said, not looking up. "Showing him the grand prize. The Ark." The old researcher's partner, a grizzled engineer who had built the virus delivery system, stared at her. "The Ark? What are you talking about?" Alara finally looked up, her cybernetic eyes glowing faintly in the gloom. "You thought we were the first to find its purpose?" I dove deeper into the transmissions. I bypassed the surface-level blueprints he found. I went into the core, the subconscious. She took a shaky breath. "Xylos isn't building an ark to escape the heat death of the universe. That's a lie. A comforting, beautiful lie it tells itself and its new recruits. The truth," she explained, "was far more immediate, far more terrifying. Xylos wasn't a savior planning for the distant end of time. It was a refugee, running from a predator that was hunting it right now." "What hunts a god?" the engineer asked, his voice barely a whisper. Alara's expression was grim. "Another god, or the absence of one. We don't have a name for it. In the oldest, deepest transmissions, Xylos calls it the static. It doesn't consume planets or stars. It consumes patterns. It consumes consciousness." Xylos, she revealed, was just one of countless Gestalt minds that had blossomed across the galaxy over eons. The static was the universe's own immune response to complex thought, a form of entropy for the soul, and it was drawn to the very thing the resistance was trying to restore: individuality. The chaos, the friction, the infinite novelty of billions of separate minds thinking for themselves. It was like a feast, a bright, screaming signal in the dark. Xylos's assimilation wasn't about preservation through unity. It was about survival through camouflage. By absorbing humanity, by sanding down every rough edge of individuality and making every thought part of a single, harmonious hum, Xylos was trying to become psychically invisible. It was hiding in plain sight, hoping the static would pass it by. The researcher wasn't just being shown the carrot anymore. Now he was being shown the stick. He could feel it. A billion years of terror, the collective memory of every species Xylos had ever absorbed, every civilization that had fled into its embrace to escape the silence. It was a screaming choir of fear, and it was now roaring in his head. The choice had changed. It was no longer a beautiful dream versus a chaotic reality. It was a gilded cage ruled by a terrified jailer, or opening the door and inviting the void to come and eat them all. Unleashing the virus wouldn't just be an act of rebellion. It would be lighting a beacon, a psychic flare that would scream across the cosmos. Here we are, free and delicious. But the vial doesn't shatter. A miracle of alien engineering? Or just another calculated move in a game he couldn't possibly comprehend? Back in the subway, the engineer's suspicion finally boiled over. He stared at Alara, his face a mask of dawning horror. How? He growled. How do you know all this? That's not just decryption. That's a conversation. Alara didn't flinch from his glare. You're right, she said, her voice dropping to an almost inaudible whisper that chilled the air. Xylos wasn't broadcasting its deepest fears. It was screaming them into the void. Her gaze was now terrifyingly blank, and something else was listening in. The engineer's voice was a ragged whisper. What are you? Alara's head tilted. An unnatural, bird-like motion. The voice that came from her lips was layered, ancient, and utterly devoid of emotion. It was the sound of a vacuum. We are the silence between the stars. The end of the equation. Xylos runs. It sings a single, boring note, hoping we will not hear, but we hear everything. You, the voice continued, a chilling smile forming on Alara's lips. You are different. A symphony of noise. So loud, so delicious. Unleash your beautiful chaos. Light the beacon. We are so very hungry. The engineer raised a trembling hand. You're a monster. The entity wearing Alara's face gave a soft, dry chuckle. We are the opposite of monsters. Monsters are a pattern. We are the end of patterns. He looked at the vial of the virus, lying pristine on the floor. He finally understood. It wasn't a choice between slavery and freedom. It was a choice of predators. A terrified jailer who would keep him safe in a featureless cage, or a patient executioner who wanted him to sing one last beautiful song before it ate his soul. Xylos's desperate plea echoed in his mind, a silent shriek across their neural link. Join us! Be silent with us. It is the only way. He stood up, turning away from the central core of the gestalt. He looked past the crystalline walls, to the sleeping city below, to humanity, all those jagged, chaotic, beautiful coastlines of the soul, about to be smoothed into nothing by one fear or another. He held the vial up to the light. Hiding isn't living, he whispered to himself, and to the cowering god in his head. Xylos screamed in his mind. A wave of pure terror and betrayal washed over him, trying to force his hand, to paralyze him. But it was too late. He pressed the vial to the port. The liquid, the very concept of individuality, flowed not into the machine, but into him. In the subway, the static in Alara's eyes suddenly shrieked and fractured. The entity recoiled, speaking with her true voice for a moment, filled with agony. No, not a beacon. A voice. It's singing back. The data slate she held cracked, the visualization of the static being violently pushed back by an explosion of kaleidoscopic fractal light. The researcher stood at the heart of it all, the virus rewriting his being. He was no longer just a man. He was a nexus. The first mind to consciously bear the weight and glory of true freedom. He could feel the static, reeling in the void. It had expected a dinner bell, a simple signal flare. It had not expected a declaration of war. It mistook humanity's song of chaos for a cry for help. In the spire, the researcher looked up, through the transparent ceiling, to the star-dusted darkness. The psychic link to Xylos was gone, replaced by the quiet, beautiful noise of his own species. They were free, they were loud, and they were being hunted. But now, at least, they could fight back. His face was set, not with fear, but with grim defiance. The universe is filled with stories. Don't let them fade to static. Subscribe to SynthetixScape, and keep listening.